At 7:42 on March 6, 1945, Corporal Clarence Smooyer crouched inside the turret of an M26 Pershing tank, positioned in the rubble-choked streets of Cologne, staring at a German Panther crew as they rotated their 75mm gun toward the intersection where two American Shermans had just halted. He was 21 years old, had spent 7 months fighting across France and Germany, and had already destroyed 5 enemy tanks. The Panther fired twice. Both shells tore through the lead Sherman's gun shield only inches apart. 3 American crewmen died instantly. The commander tried climbing out, but his left leg was gone below the knee. Smooyer had grown up in Peeville, Pennsylvania, deep in coal country where his father worked in the mines. He had never even been in a fistfight. He had hunted one time for rabbit and felt sick afterward. Now he sat behind the gun sight of America's most powerful tank, watching smoke pour from a Sherman crew compartment 2 streets ahead. By March 1945, the U.S. Army had already lost thousands of Shermans to German guns. The Panther outweighed the Sherman by 10 tons. The Tiger weighed even more. German 75mm and 88mm guns could pierce Sherman armor at distances where American 75mm rounds simply bounced off German steel. During the Battle of the Bulge, just 3 months earlier, American tank battalions had been shattered. Entire companies lost half their tanks in single battles. Crew survival numbers told the truth. If your Sherman was hit, you had only seconds to escape before ammunition cooked off and turned 33 tons of steel into a furnace. The issue had been obvious since Normandy, but the solution had been delayed for 3 years. Army Ground Forces Command, led by Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, insisted the Sherman was good enough. Tank destroyers would deal with enemy armor. American doctrine said tanks supported infantry and avoided tank versus tank combat. German doctrine and battlefield reality said the opposite. The Ordnance Department had designed a heavy tank back in 1942. The T-26 program produced several prototypes. Each version added armor, improved the gun, refined the suspension, and also added weight and complexity. McNair's staff rejected every design. The Sherman had worked in North Africa, they argued. Why change what wasn't broken? By 1944, that belief was costing American crews their lives. The Battle of the Bulge changed everything. Around 400 German tanks, including Panthers and Tiger IIs, smashed into American lines in December 1944. Sherman crews fought bravely and died quickly. After the Ardennes, no one could pretend the Sherman was enough. In January 1945, the first 20 Trillions 26 E3 tanks, later named the M26 Pershing, arrived at the Belgian port of Antwerp. General Omar Bradley divided them between 2 veteran divisions, 10 for the 3rd Armored, 10 for the 9th Armored. The tanks reached a maintenance yard near Aachen, Germany, on February 17th. Division commanders sent their best crews for training. The Pershing used a different transmission than the Sherman, but had similar controls. Each crew fired 28 rounds to get used to the 90mm gun. The flash was larger, the recoil stronger, and the noise rang your ears even through the intercom headset. Smooyer recalled his first test shot. A farmhouse stood 1,200 yards downrange. Major General Maurice Rose, commander of the 3rd Armored Division, stood 20 feet behind the tank with his staff. Rose had chosen to target the farmhouse chimney. Smooyer centered the reticle and fired. The muzzle blast knocked Rose and every officer near him flat on their backs. The chimney shattered into fragments. Rose stood, brushed dirt off his uniform, and grinned. Smooyer hit 2 more chimneys at longer distance. Rose approved the Pershing for combat. If you want to see how Smooyer's experimental tank performed in Cologne streets, please hit that like button. Every like helps us bring these forgotten stories to more people. Please subscribe. Back to Smooyer. The first Pershing entered combat on February 25th near the Rohr River. One was knocked out the next day by a hidden Tiger, but the others destroyed. German tanks at ranges where Shermans would have stood no chance. By early March, the 3rd Armored was pushing toward the Rhine. Cologne, sitting on the western bank, was once a major industrial city, Germany's 4th largest, but now reduced to rubble and smoke. 262 Allied bombing raids had turned most of the city into broken stone and twisted steel. Only the twin spires of Cologne Cathedral still rose above the devastation like tombstones. On March 6 morning, Smooyer's crew received orders. They would lead the advance into Cologne's city center. Their Pershing, one of only 20 in Europe, would be first through every intersection and first to draw fire from every hidden anti-tank gun. Rose himself had selected them for the assignment. It was meant as an honor. Smooyer touched the small Bible in his breast pocket and watched the streets ahead narrow into darkness. The Pershing lurched forward at 0800 hours. Staff Sergeant Robert Early commanded from the turret. Corporal John Derrig loaded the 90mm shells. Private Homer Davis assisted on the bow machine gun. Private William McVeigh drove. Smouyer manned the main gun. They had been a crew since September 1944, fighting through Normandy hedgerows and Ardennes snowdrifts in a Sherman. 3 weeks earlier, they had received the Pershing. They named their tank Eagle 7 after the Philadelphia Eagles. Cologne had been Germany's fourth largest city, 1 million people before the war. Now, perhaps 40,000 remained, hiding in cellars and subway tunnels beneath mountains of debris. The streets were canyons of shattered masonry. 3-story buildings had collapsed into the roads. Tram lines twisted into the air like metal vines. Every intersection offered a dozen firing spots for German Panzerfaust teams. Every basement window could conceal an 88mm anti-tank gun. The 3rd Armored Division had pushed into Cologne's outskirts on March 2nd. 4 days of brutal house-to-house combat followed. German defenders used the city's infrastructure to their advantage. Underground pedestrian tunnels linked basements across entire blocks. Troops called them mouse trails. German infantry would suddenly appear behind American positions attack, then vanish back underground before anyone could react. Snipers fired from church steeples and factory smokestacks. Anti-tank teams waited for American vehicles to pass and then fired into the thin rear armor. The Pershing's strengths were clear. Its frontal armor was 4 inches thick, twice the Sherman's protection. The 90mm gun could penetrate any German tank at typical combat distance. But in urban fighting, those advantages meant far less. A Panzerfaust, fired from 20 feet away, didn't care how thick the armor was. Molotov cocktails dropped from 3rd-story windows ignited on engine decks, where plating was thinnest. The Pershing weighed 46 tons. Many Cologne bridges weren't strong enough to hold that weight. Streets that Shermans moved through easily became traps for the heavier tank. Smouyer watched through his periscope as Eagle 7 rumbled past the ruins of what once had been a shopping district. Mannequins lay scattered among shattered glass and bricks. A streetcar sat overturned, its windows blasted out. Entire blocks had burned. The smell of smoke, and worse, drifted through the tank's ventilation system. Every 40 yards, the Pershing halted while MCV checked for hazards. Rubble could conceal mines. Shell craters could snap a track. The radio crackled with updates from other units. Sherman tanks were clearing side streets. Infantry squads moved from building to building. German resistance was weaker than expected. Most Wehrmacht formations had pulled back across the Rhine during the night. The bridges were wired with explosives. German engineers waited for the command to detonate them. Only rearguard troops remained on the western bank, volunteers who had sworn to fight until their last round. Eagle 7 rounded a corner and entered a wider avenue. The twin spires of Cologne Cathedral rose in the distance, perhaps half a mile ahead. The cathedral had somehow survived the bombing, a miracle in the eyes of many. 262 raids had reduced the surrounding city to rubble, yet the medieval structure remained untouched. Its Gothic towers served as navigation points for every unit in Cologne. Every map reference began at the cathedral. Every radio call mentioned the spires as a landmark. The Pershing rolled forward another block, then another. As they neared the city center, the streets widened. More dangerous, too. Wider streets meant longer sightlines. Longer sightlines meant German gunners had extra seconds to aim. Smouyer kept his eye pressed to the gun sight, scanning windows and doorways. His right hand rested on the turret traverse control. His left hovered near the trigger. At 9:15, the radio delivered fresh orders. German tanks were operating near the cathedral square. At least 2 Panthers confirmed, possibly a Tiger as well. American infantry had fallen back after taking casualties. Eagle 7 was ordered to reach the cathedral area and destroy enemy armor. Smouyer felt his mouth go dry. The Pershing had never engaged a Panther in direct combat. Every crewman knew the numbers. Panther frontal armor was 5 inches thick. Its 75mm gun could penetrate 6 inches of steel at 1,000 yards. In North Africa and Normandy, lone Panthers had wiped out entire American platoons. The Pershing's engine growled as MCV increased speed. Through the periscope, the cathedral spires grew larger. Somewhere ahead, German tank crews were waiting. At 9:30, Eagle 7 entered the cathedral district. The streets narrowed again. Surviving buildings rose 4 and 5 stories, forming urban canyons where sunlight barely reached the ground. Smoke from morning fires drifted between the ruins. MCV slowed the Pershing to walking pace. The 46-ton tank made less noise at low throttle, but each turn of the tread still echoed off the stone walls. Smouyer rotated the turret slowly, covering the left side as Davis watched the right through his bowgun periscope. The 90mm gun swept across alley mouths and storefronts. Empty windows stared back like skull sockets. This section of Cologne had been a commercial district once, department stores, cafes, office buildings. Now it was a maze of shadow and collapse, where any doorway could conceal a Panzerfaust team. The radio transmitted in short bursts. 2 American infantry companies were pinned down 3 blocks east of the cathedral. German machine gun fire from multiple positions, mortar rounds raining on their location. They needed armor support, but no Shermans could reach them. Approaching streets were blocked by rubble. Only the broad avenue Eagle 7 was following remained clear enough to reach the cathedral square. Another message arrived. 2 Shermans from F Company had tried to reach the square from the north. They were operating without infantry dangerous in city fighting, but F Company's riflemen were tied down elsewhere. The Shermans were ordered to scout the square, identify enemy positions, then pull back and wait for reinforcements. Early acknowledged. Eagle 7 would link up with the F Company Shermans near the cathedral. 3 American tanks together could suppress enemy positions long enough for infantry reinforcements to push forward. Standard combined arms practiced the kind of operation the 3rd Armored had executed successfully many times since Normandy. The Pershing rolled past a burned-out German half-track. Its crew lay nearby, killed by American machine gun fire sometime during the previous day. Beyond the half-track, the street widened into a small plaza. A fountain stood in the center dry, chipped, and pitted by shell fragments. The avenue continued straight ahead toward the cathedral spires. At 947, Smouyer heard the sound through his headset. 2 rapid booms, heavy caliber echoing from somewhere up ahead. Then silence. Then a 3rd boom, tank gunfire. Without question, tank gunfire. A moment later came the familiar crack thump of high-velocity rounds striking armor plate. Moments after that, the radio exploded with frantic reports. An F Company Sherman had been hit. Crew bailing out. The 2nd Sherman taking fire. German tank position unknown, but somewhere near the cathedral. All units were warned. Panther operating in the cathedral area. Early's voice came through the intercom steady, controlled, despite the chaos. Eagle 7 would move forward. They were the only American tank positioned to engage. The F Company Shermans were likely destroyed or immobilized. Infantry couldn't advance while a German tank dominated the square. The mission stayed the same: eliminate the enemy armor. MCV shifted gears. The Pershing accelerated a little, still slow for open ground, but faster than the cautious crawl they'd used so far. More speed meant more noise. More noise meant German ears would pick them up sooner, but it also meant less time exposed in any one spot. Urban combat always balanced risk against risk. Smouyer checked his ammunition. The ready rack held 6 90mm rounds within reach, 3 armor-piercing, 3 high-explosive. Derrigui had arranged additional shells around the turret by type. In a sustained fight, they could fire 20 rounds before needing to pull more from hull storage. Against a Panther, however, the engagement would be decided within the first few shots. Either Eagle 7 destroyed the German tank fast, or the German tank destroyed Eagle 7. Tank-on-tank duels rarely lasted long. The street ahead bent slightly left. Past that curve, the cathedral square would appear. Somewhere in that square, or in the adjoining streets, a Panther crew waited. They had already killed at least 3 American tankers. They knew more were on the way. Smouyer pressed his eye into the rubber guard of the gun sight. His finger shifted onto the trigger. The turret traverse control felt firm under his right hand. Eagle 7 rounded the bend at about 15 miles per hour, tracks rattling over broken pavement, exhaust smoke trailing from the rear grills. The cathedral's twin spires filled the forward view. At 952, Cathedral Square opened before them. The towering Gothic structure dominated everything, its spires rising 516 feet above the ruins. The plaza stretched roughly 300 yards across. Once paved with stone, it was now cratered and littered with debris. Behind the cathedral, the Hohenzollern Bridge crossed the Rhine, rigged with enough explosives to bring the entire span down. Smoke drifted across the square from fires still burning nearby. Through the haze, Smouyer spotted the first Sherman. It sat motionless in the center of a cross street, angled slightly as if it had braked suddenly. Smoke billowed from the open commander's hatch. The gun pointed skyward at a strange, frozen angle. MCV brought Eagle 7 to a stop 1 block short of the square. The Pershing rested in the shadow of a partly collapsed office building. From here, the crew could observe without exposing themselves. Early studied the scene through his vision blocks. The Sherman had taken at least 2 hits, probably within moments. Clean, precise gunnery. The German crew knew exactly what they were doing. The second Sherman was not visible from Eagle 7 feet's angle, though radio call placed it somewhere along the northern edge of the square, also knocked out. That meant the German tank or tanks had commanding fire lanes covering several approaches to the cathedral. Any American vehicle entering the square would be targeted instantly. Early made his decision not. He decided to scout the area on foot. Leaving the Pershing sitting still and exposed was risky. but pushing forward blindly into a prepared ambush was far worse. He had to locate the German tank's exact position before sending Eagle 7 into the fight. He climbed out of the turret hatch and dropped down onto the street. About 30 yards ahead, an American soldier stepped out from a doorway. Technical Sergeant Jim Bates of the Army Signal Corps. He carried a 16mm movie camera, a rucksack packed with film magazines hanging off his back. Bates had been assigned to record the 3rd Armored Division's movements since Normandy, filming battles, interviewing troops, documenting the liberation of towns. His footage regularly appeared in newsreels shown in American theaters. Bates had been accompanying an infantry squad when the first Sherman got hit. He had captured the German tank's muzzle flash, the round slamming into the Sherman's turret, and the crew trying to escape. He had clear footage of everything. Now he wanted even more. An American heavy tank in Cologne was already major news, but a Pershing going head-to-head with a German Panther? That would be unbelievable. Early and Bates advanced together, keeping close to the buildings. They reached a corner where they could look into the cathedral square without revealing themselves. Early scanned the plaza slowly and carefully. The disabled Sherman lay in full view. Beyond it, partly hidden by a side street, he caught sight of the Panther. The German tank waited in an ideal ambush spot. Its gun pointed straight down the avenue where the Shermans had come from. The long 75mm barrel jutted from the sharp-edged turret like a finger aimed at the kill zone. The Panther crew had picked their ground. Well, they could fire across the entire square while staying partly concealed. Any American tank entering from the north would present its weaker side armor. Early studied the angles. The Panther couldn't see Eagle 7 where it sat now. The buildings blocked their view. But if Eagle 7 rolled into the square, the Germans would spot it instantly. A head-on engagement across 300 yards of open space didn't favor either side. Both tanks had guns that could punch through the other's armor at that distance. But there was another route. A side street ran parallel to Eagle 7's approach. If the Pershing made a loop around the block, they could come in from the west. The Panther's gun faced north. To fire west, its turret would have to rotate, and turret rotation took precious seconds. Not many seconds. Maybe 3 or 4, but that was enough. Enough for a single decisive shot. Early returned to Eagle 7 and explained the plan through the intercom. They would move down the parallel street. At the intersection nearest the cathedral, they'd turn left and enter the square. The Panther would be on their right, almost perfectly 90 degrees from the Pershing's gun. Smouyer would have an open shot at the Panther's thin side armor the killing blow. McVeigh acknowledged. Durigi loaded an armor-piercing shell. Davis prepared the bow gun. Smouyer rotated the turret until the main gun aimed right, setting up. The angle they would need the instant they reached the intersection. The Pershing's engine roared, and the 46-ton machine began to move. Bates positioned himself in a second-story window overlooking the square, his camera ready. Eagle 7 rolled toward the crossroads where the Panther waited. The Pershing entered the side street at 958. The narrow avenue barely accommodated the heavy tank. Chunks of shattered buildings cluttered the pavement. McVeigh steered around a crater, keeping their speed steady. Too slow, and they'd be an easy target. Too fast, and Smouyer wouldn't be able to aim. Through the driver's vision blocks, the intersection slowly came into view, and just beyond it, the cathedral square opened to the right. Smouyer kept his eye fixed to the gun sight, focused on the angle where the Panther would appear. His finger hovered on the trigger. The turret was already turned 90 degrees right. Once they cleared the corner, the German tank should fall directly into his sight line. Should, because battle never unfolded exactly as planned. 50 yards to the intersection. 40, 30. McVeigh held their pace. The engine noise would alert the Panther crew, but they would need a moment to determine the direction in the echoing streets. The German commander would require seconds to react. 20 yards, the Pershing's bow pushed out into the intersection. Through McVeigh's periscope, he caught sight of the Panther instantly, sitting exactly where Early said it would be, roughly 100. And 10 yards away, the distance was essentially point blank for a 90mm gun, but the Panther's turret was already turning. Its long barrel swung toward them. Someone inside the German tank had spotted the Pershing faster than anyone expected. McVeigh made a split-second call. He refused to stop. Halting would leave Eagle 7 sitting still, and a still tank was a dead tank. Instead, he slammed the throttle forward. The Pershing jerked ahead into the intersection, cutting across the German tank's line of fire. Through his sight, Smouyer watched the Panther appear, the sharp turret edges, the long cannon, the dark muzzle moving toward him. Every instinct screamed that he was staring straight into a 75mm gun capable of punching through their armor at this range. But training overrode panic. Smouyer didn't wait for the Pershing to halt. American tanks almost never fired while moving. Their guns weren't stabilized, and accuracy dropped dramatically. but stopping meant certain death. He corrected for the tank's motion, led the Panther slightly, and pulled the trigger. The 90mm fired at 9:59 and 12 seconds. The armor-piercing round crossed the 110-yard gap in less than a heartbeat. It slammed into the Panther's turret front, just under the gun mantlet. Even through the smoke and muzzle flash, the impact could be seen. Sparks burst from the strike point. Inside, metal shards broke off the interior armor, becoming deadly fragments in the crew compartment. Inside the Panther, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bartelborth struggled to interpret what he was seeing. The tank that had suddenly appeared wasn't shaped like a Sherman, too low, too angular. For a split moment he wondered if it was German. The hesitation lasted half a second. Then the hit landed. McVeigh brought the Pershing to a stop right in the intersection, completely exposed. But stopped meant Smouyer could fire accurately. Durigi already had another armor-piercing round in hand. The breech was open. He shoved the round in and snapped it closed. Smouyer never lifted his eye from the gun sight. The first shot had hit high a solid strike, but not fatal. The Panther could still fight. He lowered his aim, targeting the side plate beneath the turret ring. The Panther's side armor was only 40mm, half the thickness of the front. The 90mm could punch through it easily. He fired again at 9:59 and 17 seconds. The shell tore into the Panther's right side, slicing through the interior and blowing out the left side armor, leaving 2 gaping holes the size of dinner plates. Inside, everything began failing. Hydraulics burst. Ammunition started to ignite. Bartelborth flung open his hatch and leapt out, landing behind the Panther away from the Pershing. 3 more crewmen followed, scrambling out as smoke poured from the engine deck. 1 man never made it. Smouyer fired a third round at 9:59 and 23 seconds. The third impact struck low on the turret, just above where the hull met the turret basket. Flames erupted immediately, fed by burning hydraulic fluid and leaking fuel. Within moments, the Panther was completely engulfed. Up in the second-story window, Jim Bates kept filming. He captured the entire fight 45 seconds from the first shot to the moment the Panther went up in flames. His footage showed it all. The Pershing entering the crossroads, the German gun swinging, the flashes, the hits, the crew jumping out. Smouyer finally leaned back from the gun sight. His hands were trembling. The Panther was gone. Eagle 7 stood unharmed. Every member of the crew was alive. The Pershing had proved its worth. The Panther burned for nearly 3 hours. Ammunition continued to cook off inside the hull, sending sparks and metal fragments into the square. By noon, everything combustible had disappeared. The turret sat twisted at a strange angle, blackened and warped by the heat. German soldiers' bodies lay scattered across the cathedral square. The infantry that had been supporting the Panther had pulled back across the Rhine once their armored cover was destroyed. By early afternoon, American troops were moving into the area. Bates climbed down from his vantage point and approached Eagle 7. The crew stood outside the Pershing, checking the tank for damage and smoking cigarettes. They hadn't taken a single hit. The Panther never fired a shot. Bartelborth's moment of hesitation had cost his crew the few seconds that mattered. Bates filmed the tankers posing beside Eagle 7. Smouyer stayed off to the side, uneasy with the attention. By 1,400 hours, more American units had secured the cathedral grounds. Engineers started inspecting the Hohenzollern Bridge for demolition charges. Infantry teams cleared buildings room by room. Resistance was minimal. Most German forces had pulled back during the fight with the Panther. The sound of heavy tank fire in the city center had told them their position was collapsing. But Cologne wasn't fully taken yet. German troops still controlled parts of the city east of the cathedral. Isolated strongpoints had to be reduced. Eagle 7 received orders to continue pushing forward. The crew climbed back inside. McVeigh fired up the engine, and the Pershing drove deeper into the shattered city. At 14:32, Eagle 7 entered a narrow street several blocks from the cathedral. Buildings rose close on both sides, forming a corridor barely wider than the tank. Ahead, the street opened into a small intersection. Beyond it, the route ran toward the Rhine riverbank. Suddenly, a black automobile shot into view from a side street, speeding across the intersection. The vehicle weaved through rubble at high speed. To Smouyer, it looked like a staff car. German officers often used similar cars to move between command posts. In city fighting, any unidentified vehicle was treated as hostile. Civilians had been evacuated weeks earlier. Anyone still in Cologne was either fighting or helping the German military. Smouyer opened up with the coaxial machine gun. Tracers slashed across the intersection, striking the car's panels. Glass shattered, but the car kept going. It sped through the intersection and vanished down another street. At that same instant, From a hidden point to Smuyer's left, a German Panzer IV opened fire with its machine gun at the same car. The tank was tucked behind a collapsed building, invisible to Eagle 7. Its crew had spotted the vehicle as well and engaged it. Fire from both tanks shredded the car. It jerked to a stop. The driver slumped forward. A passenger door opened. Someone fell to the pavement and didn't move. Smuyer saw the muzzle flash from the German tank, a Panzer IV, an older model, likely a Mark 5 AOSF. Age. Not as dangerous as a Panther, but still more than capable of killing a Sherman. Against a Pershing, the odds leaned toward the Americans. But the Panzer's position was excellent. It had cover. Eagle 7, meanwhile, was exposed in the open street. The German tank began backing up, sliding deeper behind its protective rubble. Smuyer could see only the front of the hull, far too little for a sure kill. Then the Panzer disappeared completely into the ruins. McVeigh tried to angle the Pershing for a better view, but the narrow street left no room to maneuver. The structure hiding the German tank was a 4-story residential building. The front face had collapsed, but the rear portion still stood. Through the gap, interior rooms were exposed. The Panzer was somewhere behind those remaining walls, repositioning for another shot. Smuyer made up his mind. He couldn't see the tank, but he could see the building itself. He swung the turret until the 90mm barrel pointed at the base of the intact wall section. The high explosive round loaded in the breech was designed for fortifications and structures. He aimed at the corner support precisely where the wall was weakest. He fired at 14:34 and 48 seconds. The He round exploded against the brick and concrete. The blast ripped away a 6-foot section of the corner support. For a short moment, nothing happened. Then gravity took over. Without its supporting corner, the entire wall lost balance. 4 floors of masonry and timber began collapsing inward. The building imploded in a roaring cascade of debris. Tons of rubble crashed down, burying the spot where the Panzer IV had been hiding. The roar echoed down the street like thunder. Dust billowed outward, blinding the intersection for several seconds. When the cloud faded, the building had vanished, replaced by a mound of broken brick and twisted metal. Somewhere inside that heap lay the German tank. Beneath the rubble, 18-year-old machine gunner Gustav Schaefer and his commander had only seconds to escape before being entombed. Schaefer and his commander clawed their way out through the turret hatch. Debris covered the tank's hull. Dust filled the air so thick it was almost impossible to breathe. They clawed their way over shattered masonry and tangled metal beams, putting distance between themselves and the American tank before another shell could be fired. The rest of their crew was still inside the buried Panzer, trying to escape through the remaining hatches. Within minutes, all 4 crewmen managed to free themselves. They slipped into the ruins and began moving toward the Rhine. By nightfall, they had crossed the river and surrendered to American military police. Eagle 7 remained engaged in operations throughout Cologne for another 2 days. The city was fully captured by American forces on March 8th. Engineers secured the Hohenzollern Bridge before German demolition teams could detonate it. Though other bridges across the Rhine had already been destroyed, the cathedral still stood, a Gothic monument rising above the devastation. Bates's footage of the Panther Jewel reached newsreel studios within a week. By late March, the film was showing in American theaters. Smuyer's sister saw it at a local cinema in Pennsylvania. She recognized him immediately and brought their parents to see it the following day. The 3rd Armored Division had little time to pause. By March 10th, they were advancing east beyond the Rhine, pushing deeper into the heart of Germany. Resistance changed from place to place. Some towns offered no fight at all. Others had to be cleared house by house. The Wehrmacht was collapsing, yet scattered units continued following orders. Hesse's formations and fanatics fought to their last breath. Hitler Youth members hurled themselves at American armor with Panzerfausts. On March 30th, Major General Maurice Rose was riding at the head of a column south of Paderborn. His leadership style never shifted. He still commanded from forward positions, refusing to coordinate from the rear. At about 1,800 hours, his G encountered a German armored element that had broken through American lines. Tiger tanks blocked the route ahead. Rose's driver tried to avoid them, but a Tiger commander cut off their escape. The German tanker rose from the turret and leveled a machine pistol at the Jeep. Rose reached toward his holster, either intending to surrender his weapon or resist. The intention is unclear. The German fired. Rose was struck multiple times and killed instantly. He became the highest-ranking American officer killed by enemy action in the European theater. His body was recovered the next day by units of the 3rd Armored Division. Smuyer's crew was involved in the recovery. Rose's death shook the entire division. Men who had served with him since North Africa struggled with the loss. He had been strict but fair, taking the same risks he demanded from his troops. His funeral was held at the Netherlands American Cemetery in Margraten, with thousands in attendance, and the war moved on. Through April, the Third Armored drove eastward, encountering scattered resistance that collapsed quickly when engaged. By late April, German units were surrendering en masse. The Wehrmacht had ceased to function as a unified fighting force. On May 7th, Germany surrendered unconditionally. May 8th became Victory in Europe Day. Smouyer remained in Germany through the summer as part of the occupation force. Eagle 7 was eventually shipped back to the United States for study and display. The Ordnance Department wanted a detailed assessment of the Pershing's battlefield performance. Engineers recorded every dent and scrape on its armor. Ballistic specialists examined the wear on the gun barrel. That maintenance crews had already noted several mechanical problems. By September 1945, Smouyer was issued orders to return home. He traveled from Bremerhaven to New York on a troop transport ship. The journey lasted 8 days. After arriving at Fort Dix, New Jersey for processing, he received his discharge papers within a week. Corporal Clarence Smouyer, United States Army, service number 334-900,086, was officially released from active duty on September 24, 1945. He went back to Pennsylvania to Lehighton, where his parents still lived, returning to familiar streets, and to people who remembered him as the quiet boy who had never wanted to become a soldier. He found employment at a cement plant. In 1946, he married Melba Whitehead. The couple had 3 children. He almost never talked about the war, yet the war never truly let go of him. At night, he dreamed of Cologne, the cathedral spires rising above drifting smoke, the burning panther in the square, the black automobile speeding across an intersection trapped between German and American fire, and the body tumbling out of the passenger door onto the cobblestones. That single image would stay with Clarence for the next 68 years. For decades, Smouyer carried the burden of that memory, the woman in the car, the figure that fell onto the street. He didn't know who she had been. He didn't know whether his own bullets had struck her, or whether the German tank's fire had ended her life. All he knew was that she had died and that he had pulled the trigger. Melba noticed the nightmares. He often awoke swinging, fighting enemies only he could see. The memories were so sharp that decades felt like days to him. In the 1970s, his son Barry died of a heroin overdose. Melba later developed Alzheimer's disease and eventually forgot who he was. She passed away in 2017 after 71 years of marriage. The people who had anchored Clarence's life as a civilian were gone. Only the war remained with him. In 1996, when he was 73, Smouyer watched Jim Bates's footage of Cologne for the very first time. A documentary on the 3rd Armored Division featured the Cathedral duel, but the footage also revealed something he had never clearly seen during the chaos of battle. The black car, the bursts of machine gun fire, the passenger collapsing from the vehicle, a woman, young, lifeless. The image confirmed what Smouyer had feared for half a century. He had killed a civilian. The realization broke him, but it also awakened a need to understand. He wanted to learn who she was. He wanted to speak to her family. He wanted forgiveness, though he doubted he deserved any. In 2013, at 89 years old, Smouyer traveled back to Cologne. A German journalist had investigated the incident and identified the victim, Katharina Esser, 26 years old, the youngest of 4 sisters. She had looked after her parents while her older sisters married and raised families. She worked as a grocery store clerk and took evening classes in home economics. On March 6, 1945, she and her employer tried to flee the city. They were caught in the crossfire. The journalist arranged a meeting at Esser's grave. Smouyer arrived expecting to face his guilt alone. Instead, he found Gustav Schaefer, the German gunner from the Panzer IV that had also fired at the car, the same man who had been buried under rubble when Smouyer's fire brought a building down. Both men were now 68 years older. Both had carried the same memory. Both believed their shots had killed Katharina Esser. They met on the cathedral steps. Smouyer reached out his hand. Schaefer shook it. Together, they walked to the mass grave, where Esser lay with other civilian victims. Neither of them knew whose bullets had killed her. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. Urban combat left no room for certainty. What mattered was that they had both fired. They both shared the responsibility. They both carried the guilt. Schaefer placed yellow roses on the grave. When Smouyer knelt to place his own flowers, he lost his balance. Schaefer caught him before he fell. 2 old men, once enemies trying to kill each other now, supported one another at the grave of the woman caught between them. A friendship grew. Letters crossed the Atlantic. Video calls connected Germany and Pennsylvania. They talked about the war not as foes, but as survivors, still trying to understand what had happened. Schaefer passed away in 2017. Smoyer sent flowers to the funeral with a note, "I will never forget you. Your brother in arms, Clarence." On September 18, 2019, Clarence Smoyer was awarded the Bronze Star for Valor during a ceremony in Washington. He was 95 years old, the final surviving member of Eagle 7's crew. The remaining crewmen received their medals posthumously, with their families accepting them in their honor. Clarence Smoyer passed away on September 30, 2022, at his home in Allentown, Pennsylvania. He was 99 years old. Since 2013, every year on March 6th, yellow roses have appeared on Katharina Esser's grave in Cologne. Someone remembers. Someone still offers an apology. In old photographs, the panther remains there in front of Cologne Cathedral, burning. The Pershing that destroyed it now rests in the National Armor and Cavalry Museum. The film footage still survives, 45 seconds, that reshaped how America viewed armored warfare. Yet the real story was never truly about tanks. It was about the men who went to war, men who killed because duty demanded it, and who spent the rest of their lives struggling to make peace with the things they had done. If this story moved you even a fraction of how deeply it moved us, do me one favor, hit that like button. Every single like pushes YouTube to show this history to more people. Tap subscribe and activate notifications. We are reviving forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day, stories about tank gunners who never wanted to fight, but still became the best at what they were forced to do. Real people, real heroism, real guilt, real redemption. Leave a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you in the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia? Our community reaches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're helping keep these memories alive. Share your location. Tell us if anyone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for helping ensure that Clarence Smoyer and Katharina Esser never fade into silence. These lives deserve to be remembered, and you are helping make that happen.